The film opens in St. Estes, California in 1996. Cletus and his girlfriend Frances were locked up together. Frances suffers from a disease that causes her to mutate so that she has superpowers. Shortly after, Frances was taken away by unknown persons to another place. On the way, Frances fights with the police using her superpower. Mulligan shot Frances in the eye and fell out of the car. They then took her to Ravenscroft Institute for treatment. A few years later, after Frances recovered, she saw a newspaper reporting the case of her lover, Cletus, who had been arrested for being a serial killer who was about to receive the death penalty. It made him look sad. He wished Cletus could release him from his cage. On the other hand, Mulligan is now a detective. He called Eddie to talk about Cletus, who just wanted to talk to him. Cletus refuses to speak to anyone except for Eddie. Eddie went to Cletus in prison to talk about his serial murder case. After talking with Cletus, Venom tells Eddie to look at something on the wall, which turns out to be a picture of a tree in a hilly mountain with a sea and some crosses. After seeing it, Eddie returned to the apartment immediately to find out the meaning of the picture. Venom helped Eddie by drawing what they saw, then looked up the information on the internet. When he saw the same picture on the internet, Eddie then looked for the location where the picture was. Eddie also managed to find the location where it turns out that Cletus hid the bodies of the victims he killed there. As a result, Cletus was immediately sentenced to death. After that incident, Eddie's career increased, and he bought a new motorcycle. Venom was very annoyed with Eddie because he was hungry and wanted to eat the brains of the bad guys. Knowing this, Eddie even prepared 2 chickens to eat, but Venom didn't want to eat them, arguing that the 2 of them were friends. Eddie confirms to Venom that the police are still looking for the case of the person whose head was lost due to being eaten by Venom earlier, and if one more head is missing, then they will be in danger. Venom kept asking for food until Eddie went to Mrs. Chen to buy chocolate. Arriving at the shop, Mrs. Chen told them that the chocolate was empty. Then Eddie went to the chicken supply shed to feed Venom, and in the end, Venom was forced to eat chicken again because he was too hungry. Shortly after, Venom saves people from criminals. He paralyzes them and tries to eat them, but he changes his mind. Then he gets a call from his ex-fiancée Anne to meet Eddie at a restaurant because he wants to tell him something. At the restaurant, they chatted for a while. Then Anne announced that she is now engaged to Dan. It made Eddie look sad, but Venom still encouraged Eddie and will continue to be with him as a partner. Back at the apartment, Venom is seen receiving an invitation. Then he gives it to Eddie. It turned out that the invitation was from Cletus to take Eddie to his prison before he would be sentenced to death. In the invitation, Cletus said that when he was a baby, he almost died. However, fortunately, he was still alive, and as a child, Cletus became so naughty that he killed his own grandmother by dropping her from the stairs. Then he also killed his own mother with a hairdryer. As a result of that incident, he received harsh treatment from his own father until finally, Cletus was sent to the St. Estes. There were also many other naughty children who bullied Cletus and even beat him until finally there was Frances, who saved him with the superpower of Sonic's voice. Eddie went to meet Cletus in prison. Arriving there, Eddie immediately talked to Cletus. It turned out that Cletus was very upset with Eddie's actions in dismantling the case. Then Cletus made words that made Eddie angry that Venom himself was provoked and attacked Cletus. When he pulled it, Cletus bit Eddie's hand until it bled. Eddie immediately rushed away from there. Then it was seen that the blood of the bite was a small part of the Venom symbiote, and Cletus swallowed it. At the apartment, Eddie fights with Venom over the incident in prison. Venom says that he wants more freedom to be able to eat the bad guys. Likewise with Eddie, who feels that his life is falling apart because of Venom. The 2 of them had a big fight in the apartment, until finally, Venom broke away from Eddie's body and moved to another person's body. On the other hand, it looks like Cletus will be ready to be executed while being watched by many people. Just as he was about to be executed, something from inside Cletus came out, giving rise to a red symbiote. Instantly the place became chaotic and the red symbiote grew bigger and bigger. This red symbiote is named Carnage. He attacked all the prison police and freed the prisoners who were in prison. Then Carnage made a tornado attack and ate the head of a leader. Cletus was finally released from prison and stole a car and went to meet his girlfriend. In the car, they talk and make a deal with each other. On the other hand, Eddie sees news about Cletus escaping from prison, and Detective Mulligan comes to visit him at the apartment. He told Eddie about the prison situation and that Cletus had messed up. This makes Eddie try to find clues about Cletus. He also remembered a picture of a house with trees that Venom had made, along with the name of a place called St. Estes. Eddie rushed over there. Venom went to the party to have fun. There are many people who admire Venom because it is considered a very good costume. Then Venom was invited to come on stage, and he expressed his sadness about Eddie. Arriving at St. Estes, Eddie found a picture of love on a big tree, which means Cletus loved Francis. Eddie immediately notified Mulligan of his discovery. He suspected that Cletus was going to see his girlfriend Francis. Hearing this, Mulligan couldn't believe it, because he remembered that he had shot Francis himself before. Meanwhile, Cletus is seen going to a shop at a gas station to search the internet so he can track his girlfriend's whereabouts in Ravenscroft. Cletus was there, and he could easily enter the room where his lover was locked up. Cletus was able to get Francis out, and they immediately left in the stolen car, but police came after them. Knowing this, Carnage immediately finished off the policeman, and at the same time Francis let out her sonic voice. However, Carnage was annoyed by the sound because he was very sensitive to loud noises. After the incident, Mulligan and his team headed to the crime scene. There they found the name Francis. Knowing this, Mulligan became suspicious of Eddie and took him to the police station because of his last interaction with Cletus. Eddie refused to answer. He asked Mulligan to contact his lawyer. Later, Anne came to see Eddie. Eddie told him that he had been separated from Venom and desperately needed his help. After hearing this, Anne rushed off to find Venom. Anne stopped by Mrs. Chen to find out the information about Venom's whereabouts and reveals that Cletus already has Carnage. Then she saw a news story about Cletus and Francis on television. After talking for a while, she realized that Mrs. Chen became different. It is revealed that Venom was in her body. Venom refuses to help Eddie because he is already disappointed in him. However, after enlarges him as a cool hero, Venom is delighted and decides to help Eddie. Arriving at the police station, Anne turns into Venom and helps Eddie escape from there. In a safe place, Venom asks Eddie to apologize sincerely before he actually decides to help Eddie. Hearing this, Eddie did it, and finally Venom entered Eddie's body again. Eddie told Anne and Dan to go as far as possible. On the other hand, it looks like Mulligan is planning to go to Eddie's place. Arriving there, he saw Cletus, who was also there. Mulligan told him to raise his hand, but Cletus immediately turned into Carnage and held him hostage because of his lover's desire to take revenge on Mulligan. In another place, Francis also took Anne as a hostage, who was about to run away with Dan, but she released Dan so he could tell Eddie that Anne was being held hostage, and for Eddie to meet Cletus at the cathedral church. While waiting for Eddie's arrival, Cletus and Francis had a wedding in the cathedral church with a priest. Eddie finally negotiates with Venom that he will let Venom eat them so that Venom will help him. The attack started with Francis making her sonic voice, but Carnage, who was distracted, immediately told her to shut up and not do it again. Then Venom's battle with Carnage begins. Shortly after, Dan arrives, who helps Venom by pouring oil on Carnage and starting a fire. After the fire was extinguished, Carnage immediately chased after him and wanted to eat Dan, but Venom was immediately restrained from behind. Then suddenly the bell rang, indicating 12:00, which made them tremble and hide in the bodies of their respective host. When Venom threw Carnage into the glass, Carnage immediately holds his body and fights back Venom until he bounces and is hit by large debris. As a form of threat to Eddie, Carnage takes Anne up to the church to be killed. There he meets Francis and tells Carnage that his actions have gone too far. Carnage, who heard that, became irritated and kept his mouth shut. Cletus, who saw Carnage's treatment of his lover, told him to stop Carnage, and Cletus clashed and looked very mismatched. Eddie and Venom, who saw it, were motivated because the two of them matched very well. They got up from the pile of rocks and took a sharp iron nearby and went straight to Carnage. Venom stabbed Carnage, which made him fall, and he was immediately caught by Venom. Later, Carnage stabbed Venom. Venom decides to use Francis's voice, which is his weakness. Then he throws Francis at a nearby bell, which makes her fall and let out a sonic sound. The bell fell right on Francis. At the same time, Eddie also fell from height. Venom also tried to get into Eddie again by passing Dan and Anne's bodies as a movement aid to get to Eddie. Just before Eddie fell to the bottom, Venom went straight into Eddie's body, while Carnage fell to the bottom, which made him very sick. The Carnage symbiote that was released was about to move towards Cletus's body. However, Venom immediately came and took it and swallowed the Carnage's symbiote. Later, Eddie and his friends left the place because they were being chased by the police, who started arriving. Eddie and Venom also said goodbye to Anne and Dan, then they left. On the other hand, we see Mulligan, who is still alive, and suddenly his eyes turn blue. Sometime later, after the incident, Eddie and Venom decided to take a vacation while thinking about what to do next. In the post-credits scene, they are seen watching TV. However, suddenly a blinding light took them from the hotel room to the other place. Venom watches a news story on television that reveals Spider-Man's identity as Peter Parker. This draws Venom's attention to Peter.